This is the Mobile Tech Podcast, brought to you by worldpodcasts.com. Now here's your host, Tech Girl, Miriam Joie.
Hi, and welcome to the Mobile Tech Podcast. I'm your host, Miriam Joie, and today is Thursday, October 31st, 2019, and my guest is YouTube creator and fellow Canadian, Karl Conrad. Hi, Karl. How are you?
Good. How's it going?
I'm good. How's the weather in TO?
Currently, we're getting a lot of rain, and, that's no surprises. I'm just more upset for the kids because it's Halloween.
Yeah.
And they're going to be going out, so that's shitty.
Yeah, that sucks. I'm excited about the trick-or-treating. We don't have kids, but we're going to have the kids come to the house from the neighborhood tonight. So, happy Halloween, everyone. It's been an interesting week in tech. Apple dropped the AirPods Pro all of a sudden. And I want to say to the audience right now that they should stay tuned because it's not me doing it, but I know somebody who is doing an AirPods Pro giveaway. And I am involved in this somehow. So stay tuned for that.
That's cool.
What are your thoughts? You got a review unit, yeah?
Yes, I did. I got them, I think, a day before launch. So I've had them officially now for 2 days.
Cool.
And, first kind of impressions are, they're very similar in form factor to the, OG AirPods, the originals. The stems are slightly shorter, but, the big thing everyone's talking about is the active noise canceling. And, the sound quality on original AirPods, aren't that good. They're just, glorified wireless headphones from Apple.
Yeah.
And, my biggest complaint was, they just didn't sound that good. And, this time around, they do sound better. And whether that's, if the drivers have been improved or if there's just a better seal now with the silicone, you definitely hear more bass. So it's a better experience, I would say. But, on the flip side, you're paying a ton of money for them. Fellow Canadian talking, $329 Canadian.
Wow.
$250 in the US. So, yeah,
Holy
they're pricey.
crap, that's a big difference, huh?
Yeah.
I guess that's what, $100 more than regular AirPods with the wireless case?
So it's only $50 more, I believe, than with the wireless case. I think.
Without the wireless case is what I'm saying.
Without the yeah. So I think that's the big difference, and I think that's what most people would end up picking between because I personally never charge my AirPods wirelessly. I always plug them in. So yeah. $100. That's a big jump.
I mean, you get wireless, you get noise cancellation, and I think you're going to get a better audio experience. I mean, obviously, I'm going by what you're saying, and others that I've talked to that I have some audio chops and they know their audio and they review audio devices. My big thing about the original AirPods is that I thought the form factor was brilliant, the size, everything, battery life. It's just a sweet spot of all the things. Very typical Apple with great software experience around it. But they sounded like utter crap to me. And I'm not talking about like the noise issues that, because you're outside and you hear all this city traffic. I'm just talking about sitting in your living room in a quiet night and you put them on. And I just was like, they sound like earpods to me that are just wireless. And super better experience wireless than wired for sure. Absolutely 100% with the whole Siri integration. But it's just for me, it's just like I can't do that. I need more than that. So I've been waiting, and actually I didn't really think that this second product from Apple was going to be the one with noise canceling. I thought they were going to go to passive noise insulation like they did with the silicone tips and improve the sound quality and just leave it at that. But we're getting no active noise cancellation, which is absolutely awesome. Like people don't understand until they use a good product with active noise cancellation. Apple only makes really good products generally. So boom, right?
Yeah, and maybe that's where that Pro name comes, that they didn't use passive. They actually have some active noise canceling going on, and they definitely are better. And I still think AirPods are despite them having poor sound quality, I still think they're one of probably the best thing that Apple has come out with innovation wise. That you see them everywhere. They're the number one selling wireless headphone, and it's I think they've just almost created their own new category there, which leading that category, which I think is cool.
Yeah, absolutely. So, it's interesting because speaking of AirPods and AirPods Pro. The morning that Apple announced that they were, these existed, I actually received a device from a company in Shenzhen or in China somewhere that is a complete AirPods clone. Like, I mean, they pitched me this and I was like, I don't do this normally, but I was like, I gotta take a look. I gotta see how bad this is gonna be.
Right.
And surprisingly, they were able to send me this without it getting intercepted by the powers that be somehow. And so the only thing that's different from obviously the originals is that, at least visually, is that there's no Apple logo anywhere. So I guess they're safe in that sense, that they're not plagiarizing Apple to the point of putting the logo. But you could not tell them apart from real AirPods if you looked at them and touched them. They're really well made. They sound good. Actually, they sound better than the original AirPods, to be honest.
Interesting.
I don't know if battery life is going to hold up. The case has wireless charging, and they have a little pairing button on the case where the Apple logo is on the original to pair with non-Apple devices, like if you have an Android phone or something.
Right.
And so it's interesting because I was like, what a coincidence that I would receive these the same day that Apple announces AirPods Pro. So I did a video. I'm going to be posting it on my YouTube channel. It's just a quick little unboxing showing you how good they've gotten at cloning this. It's like back when I was at Engadget, we use this word a lot and you don't hear it too much anymore. It's a 4-initial KIRF, keeping it real fake, #KERF. This is like the ultimate #KERF. And so, I'm just impressed that somebody's been able to replicate and it's to the point, Karl, where you can open the door on these fakes and the Apple, like it registers on the iPhone like as AirPods. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like it brings up the interface.
And so even with like setup, that.
Yeah, they have that going. Yeah, I don't know. And when you pair them with your phone, it says AirPods. The Bluetooth name by default says AirPods.
Right. Oh,
I wonder
that's interesting.
if they're made in the same factory or something. Anyway, the thing that's crazy about them is that they are different. They sound better in my opinion, and I'm sure they don't have all the features and like the latency like all the like the W1 chip stuff, right? Like all the really great. I'm sure that's not in there. But, nonetheless, it even has a lightning connector, which, as you know, very few devices have a lightning connector that like accepts a lightning cable. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Like you have to be MFI, best buddies with Apple to get that,
so
right?
I think that might be coming from the same factory then, just a little offshoot there.
It's crazy. Either that or this is just a lightning connector without the authentication chip and it just works, right? Like, I mean, who knows? This is China. Anyway, back to the AirPods Pro. I love the design. I love that they're smaller. The stems are shorter. Obviously, you haven't used them. How's that experience with squeezing the stems? I hear that it does a little click sound, kind of like the MacBook trackpads, right?
Yeah, it's it's pretty seamless, kind of in like Apple fashion. It just makes sense when you hold on the stem. There's like this actual like flat part of the stem that your finger will identify that, hey, this is the correct part I'm grabbing onto, and then holding it down, that enables transparency mode. That's probably the best ambient noise type of software that I've ever like heard. So I think transparency mode is probably one of my favorite features because there are those times when you're on the subway and there's a sound thing that goes off. You can see everyone looking around and you're like, what's going on? I've got active noise canceling on, and then you press the stem. I did that the other day, and then you can kind of hear what's going on around you, and you can even hear your own voice, which is kind of cool.
No, of course. It's actually funny how many reviewers are gushing about this feature because that's on every good pair of noise-canceling headphones that I've ever used. Like my Sony WH-1000 X, whatever they are, the Mark IIIs, and then the QC30s, and I mean, it's funny that I guess there's not that many. Well, I shouldn't say that. The Sony's WF-1000. X, the earbud ones that have noise canceling, they do also have the thing where you can touch the touchpad and it goes into transparency mode. So I'm surprised that people are so excited about that because that's kind of a necessary feature if you have ANC on. For me, I fly a lot and I just, when I'm on the airplane and I hear the pilot making an announcement, it's not the flight attendant telling me about safety, but the pilot comes on. I usually cover the ear cups on my Mark III headphones from Sony just to hear what, if, there's something important the pilot has to say. Yeah. And I love it.
Yeah, I was just going to say, it's funny that you mentioned flying. We both fly like a ton, and this is probably the place where I wouldn't use AirPod Pros.
Exactly.
I pass out, all the time when I'm flying, and to lose one of those things, if you think about it, it's like $125 per pod.
Wow.
If that thing were to fall out, and I can't imagine looking through your seat trying to find that guy. And obviously, compared to dedicated over-the-ear cans, they're just not as good.
I think it's the battery life that doesn't make it practical. I think that the AirPod Pros are probably comfortable enough, but then after 4 hours, you need to charge them up again. If you're on a 14-hour flight, then, my Sonys, they last 30 hours on a charge. So it's like, I can do 2 flights. I don't even have to charge them when I get to my destination. Yeah. But I mean, look, you're right. It's not designed for that. It's designed for commuting, and it's designed to provide more insulation so that you can enjoy your music more, and better sound quality so you can enjoy your music more, with of course the drawback that yes, you are now have to be a little more aware of your surroundings, unless you turn off the noise cancellation, which you can do. And I love the interface. I love how they've implemented it as a double tap in the volume slider. There's a whole bunch of great Apple user experience features there, right? Yeah. So I think this is a no-brainer. If you're an Apple person right now and you've been waiting for something that sounds better than the AirPods, this is it. Like, do not even go anywhere else. You've got it. This is your commuter's dream come true. And if you're an Android user, I would say give them a try, because honestly, I've used AirPods with Android phones before, and you lose some of the convenience feature, but the experience isn't diminished that much. And especially with this active noise cancellation, I think you're going to really benefit, right?
Yeah, I think the only thing you miss out on is, Siri integration, but, there are definitely better choices than Siri, so you're not missing out too much.
I'm wondering actually if anybody's tested that, and if, a long hold of the stem still triggers something that in the Android software brings up the Google Assistant. It's very possible, because a lot of that is driven by standardized, take a call, reject a call mechanisms in these. So in standard Bluetooth protocol, it's possible Apple mapped this to some extent to work kind of possibly once you've configured them, It'd be interesting. Somebody's going to have to try that. I don't have them. Otherwise, I would have by now. Maybe it's a video for you, Karl.
I was going to say, that's the next viral video.
Yeah. Cool. Any other thoughts on that? Do you think, I think the pricing's right. The technology and the size is really great. I love how they have that balancing of air pressure system. That's one of the biggest problems I have. Personally, I'm used to it because I've been using in-ear canal earbuds with passive noise cancellation, like basically the ones that are basically earplugs in your ears for years, like wired ones. When I flew before active noise canceling headphones were a thing. So I don't mind, but I know that for a lot of people, the reason they don't like the noise insulating earbuds is because of the pressure differential. And I know that Apple finally nailed that by having a port in there that lets the air balance between the two cavities, as it were, right?
Yeah, it's interesting. It's that small little, at first I thought that was, just a design differentiator to show people, hey, like I've spent, $250 on AirPod Pros. But yeah, it's actually a vent that, allows, like you said, air to go through, kind of balances that pressure. And there's microphones actually on both sides. So, it's kind of sensing what the ambient sound is outside, and then on the inside it's actually listening to the reverb from what's going in your ear canal to kind of adjust the EQ.
And it does tune it not just once, like my Sonys, you can tune them to your ears. Right. There's a button in the app, you do that and it's tuned, but then you have to do it again if you change altitude or whatever. This is dynamic, right? I think it happens like 100 times a second or something like that.
Yeah, it's something ridiculous, which, when I kind of got, a quick, spiel, like I got the PR email, I was like, whoa, really? Like it's that much? That's crazy.
Yeah, so that's pretty cool. I think that's kind of unique. The size, of course, the technology, that's very, they still are the best at making small, very small, super high quality product with great battery life. Nobody has come this close. You compare the size of these to the Sony ones, it's the WF-1000s.
Yeah.
It's like not even in the same league. And, you know, there's, of course, the Amazon ones and the... I don't think the Amazon ones have noise canceling, so they don't count. We have to think of the ones that have noise canceling. There's not really that many earbuds that are good that have noise canceling. So,
yeah,
you know, yeah. So I don't know. I think this is exciting. I'm looking forward to trying. Like, this is the first time that I'm actually thinking maybe I should just buy a pair and just try them out.
Yeah.
Because I mean, the AirPods, I know they were going to be great, but I knew they're going to sound like crap because I listened to them once and I was just like, meh. And for me, that's, you know, that's more important, the sound quality, than the experience in some ways. So, yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. That's, you know, I chat to a lot of like people about that because, you know, I feel like I border onto the, you know, lifestyle tech, you know, kind of route. And, you know, I'm actually willing to sacrifice some sound quality for, say, like the convenience, the, you know, the ease of it. And that's why I still would probably, you know, I used my original AirPods until, you know, 2 days ago, almost every single day. And, you know, this, like you said, it's kind of huge for me to get, you know, something that sounds better and still have that same, you know, ease and form factor.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the other thing, that's again, it's software, little details that it's Apple sweats the details, and that's what we love about them. And it's the, you know, the part where it tells you whether you have the right tip installed, right? So that's using that internal microphone and that echo, you know, detection inside your ear canal, or, you know, basically does sonar to analyze your ear canal. You know, that thing is really brilliant because I always, you know, I kind of know roughly what my ear size is from years and years of using in-ear canal earbuds, but this is going to be a new experience for so many users, right? Yeah. And they're going to need to know, like, am I hearing this right? Is this in my ear properly? And this tells them. And I think that's kind of cool.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. It's, you know, I was very lucky that, you know, say the original AirPods fit me kind of perfectly, but, you know, a lot of my friends, my girlfriend, like, they're like, oh, these always fall out of my ear. They're, you know, they just don't fit properly or they hurt too much. You know, and I think having the different choice options of tips, obviously I don't agree that they charge, I think it's $4.50 if you lose them from the store, which is ridiculous for, you know, 1 cent or 2 cent silicone tips. But hey, you know, that's,
well,
it is
for Apple, that's a miracle.
I guess so, right? Yeah.
I mean, don't argue too much. Just go with it. You know, at this point,
true.
If you spend $250 or 329 Canadian on these, honestly, the $4 US, whatever it translates to be in Canadian dollars for the Canadian pricing of the replacement tips, is going to be the least of your concerns. Okay.
No, you're right. You're right. I guess that's the same as, you know, driving a fancy car and complaining about premium gas.
I mean, I would actually preemptively buy a bunch and keep them in my bag or something at that point, you know, once you determine which size is right for you. And the other thing is, and obviously Apple made a point of this, but I've always said that to people who, you know, use earbuds with a rubber or silicone tip, is that you might not need the same size on both sides. So just be aware of that, you know. Feel what your ears are telling you and go from there, basically. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, this is good news. I was kind of hoping they would announce a MacBook 16 the next day, though.
That's the one 16. That, you know, we're all kind of, you know, keeping our fingers crossed for. And I'm wondering if they're going to do that before, you know, end of the year. I think they still have maybe like a 1 to 2 week window before, you know, they really want to ramp up for Christmas. So we'll see.
I mean, it would be a nice holiday gift, especially before the U.S. Thanksgiving timeframe, which is coming up. I kind of want to see it. I mean, I'm not going to run out and buy one. I don't need one right now. But I'm thinking that for a lot of people, hopefully it solves a lot of pain points, especially around the keyboard. So this wasn't in the show notes, but this is how the podcast is. There were rumors, in case you're listening and you're wondering what we're talking about, there were rumors of a MacBook Pro 16 potentially coming this week. So, I mean, it's been coming for a while. We know there's been leaks and stuff, but, you know, not this week. So maybe next week, or maybe, you know, I don't know, maybe early December. That would be very weird for Apple to do, but it is not like a kind of gift you buy for the holidays per se. It's more like, I need a tool. I'm a professional. Let's buy a new tool. So they could get away with selling it anytime, really.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah. Are you excited about that? Are you using a MacBook Pro right now, or or a MacBook Air, or what are you on when you're on the go?
Yeah, so I do have the latest, 2019, MacBook Pro 15-inch. It's the one with the 8 cores, and yeah, it's obviously a portable beast.
Yeah.
And you kind of need that when you're in the YouTube game. I record in 4K.
Yeah,
I need to
4K
be.
is where it's like, you're in a different league. It's
Yeah.
like you need
Yeah.
some serious power. Yeah.
So yeah, that's my current machine, and obviously, if the 16-inch drops, I just kind of always shake my head at my wallet sometimes. But that's kind of the nature of the game, being in the tech YouTube space.
Yeah, I know. I mean, I just feel like if you're doing 4K, this is going to be a no-brainer, especially if they improve the keyboard and they put a real escape key in there. For me, that is going to be the thing, because I'm not a big fan of the touch bar, because
Right.
I'm a former game developer, so I like my function keys and I like my escape button. A lot of people don't think it's a big deal, but having at least a physical escape key is something that I feel is critical. So this might be the one that I actually go like, okay, I think I can do the touch bar now. I've been trying to avoid it for a while now, but
Yeah, I'm not too crazy about the touch bar either. It's maybe the coolest thing, most gimmicky is just scrolling through your emojis when you're on iMessage. But to have a glorified touch bar that they claim that makes it more expensive, I'd rather just have the dedicated hard keys.
For sure. Speaking of great keyboards, I got a Pixelbook Go review unit this week. Watch
Sweet.
for a YouTube unboxing video on my channel. I think you've got one as well. What's been your experience with this device?
Yeah, I got one. We were chatting about when we were at the Pixel 4 launch, and I was lucky enough to grab a review unit as well. And I've unboxed it, I've used it quickly, and it's in the step in the right direction, I think, that Google needs to go in. The what was the one from last year? Was that the Slate?
The Slate was a disaster. And then 2
Oh
years
my
ago, we
God.
had the actual
Yeah.
Pixelbook, which I still use, which I absolutely love.
Right.
So, yeah.
Yeah, the Slate I thought was just that was I will say pretty much awful. It wasn't that good. And I think they need to go towards just dedicated Chromebooks, nothing fancy, because in the end you don't need a ultra expensive. I can't remember how much the Slate was, but it was definitely pricey.
Yeah.
That's running Chrome OS.
Yeah, it was the Pixel Slate was just I don't even want to talk about it. It was such a mess. It does in my world. It doesn't exist. The reason is this: I'm a Chromebook user since day one. Like I wrote the first story in Engadget about Chromebooks, and so from that day I was convinced, because I always thought, like, if you're mostly on the web, you really don't need anything else. Like, I understand that, I use a MacBook because I need to edit video and edit photos, and for that, you can't beat that. Or like a Surface Laptop 13 or something. I get it, right? Yeah. Totally get it. But if you're just like doing, what a lot of bloggers and tech journalists do, which is, the YouTube creator journalists that just write stories, you just really need to be on the web.
Yeah.
And at that point, a Chromebook makes a lot of sense. But Chromebooks have always been, from day one, kind of like angled at education and cheaper, and and for that they fit. In the early days they were a little rocky, but then by about year 3, Google put their foot down and said, you need a good trackpad, you need a good keyboard, we need to standardize this keyboard layout, we need to force everyone to use really nice glass trackpads and stuff, and everybody did, and then it became a decent experience even at $300, right? Yeah. But there was always this kind of halo effect of Google doing their own thing and showing what a Chromebook could be. Nobody bought it, but it was always there. And it started with the Chromebook Pixel that then got a next generation, and that then eventually got replaced by the Pixelbook, which then got not replaced, but again, by the one we don't want to speak of, the Pixel Slate. And then now we have this Pixelbook Go. So I think what you have to think about, and I'm not talking specifically you, Karl, but I think the audience here, is that there's kind of the Chromebook world, and then there's kind of like the Chromebooks, the generic ones made by Acer, Asus, HP and Dell, etc. And they're affordable. There's a few of them that are mid-range and pretty nice. But then there's Google's view on that, Google's perspective, and that's all what we can basically put under the name Pixelbook, even though the original Chromebook Pixel was called Chromebook Pixel. Really high, like they've always gone for really high end, like $1,000, like basically compete with MacBook. Even the entry level MacBook Airs have always been what, $800-900, right? So like we're talking way more than an average Chromebook, and that's kind of where the Pixelbook Go kind of lives. And in that range, in that realm, it is affordable for a Pixelbook, but it does make some sacrifices, in my opinion, compared to what Google has served us up for all these years. Starting with the Chromebook Pixel, they went with 3.2 aspect ratio, a touch screen, and a Retina display, like some sort of high-res 2K plus display. And you know, that was a revelation. And of course, a good keyboard, a good trackpad, good battery life. And you know, I never bought a Pixel or Pixelbook from like a Chromebook Pixel, Pixelbook from Google. Thankfully, they were nice to provide me with devices. But I have to tell you that if you've used the MacBook Pro, it's basically the same experience, but dedicated to Chrome OS and Chrome. And it's a great experience. Like you're really loving that keyboard and that trackpad and that display and the lightweight and the metal construction and the battery life and all the good stuff. And then the Pixelbook original really took this to the next level by making it a 2-in-1 that converted into a tablet. Right. And had a pen and a bunch of stuff. So the Pixelbook Go, where does it fit? So basically it's kind of like $649 entry price, $1399. This is US pricing. For a high-end model, which I wouldn't buy at this point. You can still buy the Pixelbook, the original, and I would go for that. If you're spending more than $1,000 on a Pixelbook Go, you're doing it wrong. But at that sweet spot of about $600 to $800, I think the Pixelbook Go is actually a much better experience than what you get from the competition at the same price. The keyboard is insane. How do you feel is the keyboard? Because, you know, the butterfly keys we know how we love to hate them and hate to love them, or whatever it is. How do you feel about? Because to me, that keyboard is even better than the Pixelbook original on the Go. So
I actually love the keyboard is probably my favorite thing on the Pixelbook Go. It's it's just lovely to use. I was just trying to be productive, just catching up on a ton of emails and stuff, and it was great. I loved it.
And the weight and the shape of the device, it's super thin, super light because it's magnesium, it's painted magnesium. The verdicts will be out to see how it wears. You remember when Apple did the titanium PowerBook back in the day? The paint would chip off that thing after a while and would look a little mangy. So I'm hoping that doesn't happen with the Pixelbook Go. But at the same time, right now, new in hand, it feels really ergonomic and really lightweight and nice, right?
Yeah, and from the kind of launch, I was a bit skeptical on the grooving on the back, but I found it very grippable, and I'm just wondering if there's gonna get gunk caught in there. I'm not too sure how that will hold up, but it's kind of been great to hold.
I actually think putting my engineering hat on, I feel like they did a really smart thing there, because by putting ripples in it, you make the base, the chassis stronger. You allow airflow when the thing is resting on a surface. So now you're better cooling, and you increase the surface area, so you even have better cooling. So it's like basically a really good passive cooling solution that gives you a better grip and looks cosmetically cool and gives you a stronger chassis, right? It's a very interesting concept. I kind of wish they did the lid the same way as well, to be honest with you. That would have been really unique,
interesting.
Right?
Yeah.
Maybe not as aggressively grooved, but in that same kind of league.
Right.
And then the other thing is, in typical fashion, USB-C on both sides, headphone jack, which the Slate didn't have last year. So that's kind of nice. But the thing that to me makes me want to go back to my original Pixelbook, which is a much more expensive product, but this is where they cut the corners, is the display. So they went from 3:2 aspect ratio, which I think is what Apple uses as well, which I think is much better. Well, I think Apple is something slightly in between that and 16:9. But the point is, this is 16:9, which I don't think is a good screen form factor, in my opinion, on laptops. But that's maybe because I'm used to Macs and I'm used to the Pixelbooks 3.2 and the Surface laptops, which are 3.2 as well. So 16:9 is not my favorite, but I could totally not care about the aspect ratio if this display wasn't kind of meh. It is not bright enough in direct sunlight. It is not the highest resolution 1080p, right? There's a 4K option, but at that point, if you spend that kind of money, Karl, why just not just buy the actual Pixelbook, right? Like again, over $1,000 of Pixelbook Go doesn't make sense in my opinion.
Yeah, you know what, I'm not too I'm not too fussy about, the display being, not super high res. It's, you kind of know you're going in with that notion, you're in that price range of, $600 to $800. You know there's going to be sacrifices. I'm not going to be pixel peeping or doing, super, high res stuff on this thing. It's, I don't think that's what it's meant for. And, I'd be willing to sacrifice that for the budget cut.
Yeah.
And, the display ratio, I just had the Surface Laptop 3. That's 3x2. Like you said, the Apple's kind of in between somewhere. Yeah, it's a yes and no. It's love to hate, but I'm not really.
Yeah, it's not a deal breaker.
Exactly.
But the deal breaker is the brightness. I think it could be brighter. Yeah. When you're used to Retina like type displays on a laptop, you notice when you go back to a 1080p display, and that's what I'm saying. And then the other thing is of course it's got a touchscreen, which a lot of people don't realize because it is not a 2-in-1, but it does have the touchscreen, which for some things, just like the Surface laptop, can come in handy. Sometimes scrolling is faster by flicking your finger on the screen or whatever. Yeah. And look, it's when they showed it to us in New York, I was just like, cool. Maybe a little like pricey, but then I thought of it competing with regular Chromebooks. Now that I know that it's a Pixelbook and has that Google experience in terms of build quality, the keyboard, the trackpad, maybe not the display, but it's close. That's, I think, a decent price, and it's a very delightful little machine. And I'm a little more happy with it now that I've used it for a few days. I've actually been writing some stories on it, and that keyboard is really making me happy. I really hope that 16-inch MacBook Pro we just talked about, it just blows us away with the keyboard. I know Apple can do it. Apple can do it, right?
Yeah. I still think they're going to stick to the butterfly switches, to be honest. That's my prediction. I know, but they're kind of set on, obviously it's part of the design. They want to keep things ultra thin. I do not see them moving away from that. But
well, let's see.
Prove me wrong.
I'm hoping that they.
I haven't looked at the leaks, so I might be out of the loop here.
Like, I'm not saying that I'm absolutely not invested in butterfly versus scissor. Like, I'm not that. That's not the argument. The argument is I want a keyboard that feels better and is more reliable, definitely more reliable, but more importantly, that has a little more travel. You could do that with butterfly. Like, I'm not saying you can't do butterfly. Like, I just think that Apple needs to completely redesign the keyboard, and I'm hoping that 16-inch MacBook Pro is the first laptop that kind of brings this to the table, where Apple makes a fuss about it in their presentation, right? Like, look, they're not going to admit that they did anything wrong, but they're going to say, we built the best keyboard we've ever built, like they always say, right? And then like have that Johnny Ive type video that goes into the details, But this time actually deliver, But because they did have that video when the original MacBook 12-inch came out, showing the scissor keys and all that. It was like a big brouhaha, right? Yeah.
I was going to say, the keyboard has been, a letdown. I think out of my last, 2 MacBook Pros, 2017, 2018, I've had to take those both in at least, 2 times with, issues with my keyboard, space bars getting stuck. That's, but, Apple's, I guess, repair team or, customer experience is, top notch. They just, fully swapped it out. Wasn't even an issue. But, it's more of the, the hassle of going in, not having your laptop for, a couple days. That definitely sucks.
It's not something they can do on the spot, unfortunately. It's not like a battery replacement. They can do it in 20 minutes. So it's challenging, and I don't know. I'm a longtime Apple fan, despite my listeners know that I'm not a huge iOS person. Like, that's okay. I love the Apple hardware and products. I'm not a big fan of the ecosystem and like how it kind of locks you in, and I'm not a big fan of iOS. But I'm a longtime Mac user, and I love Mac OS, and I think iPadOS is getting very interesting, and iOS is getting very good. I could totally live with an iPhone, especially the 11 the entire 11 series is a magnificent device this year. Yeah, and all that. But I just want to say, like, Macs are my very dear to my heart. So I just really would have loved in an alternate history, Apple would have not messed up this keyboard situation. You know what I'm saying? Like
another universe,
and they wouldn't, and the touch bar wouldn't exist. Like, you know, that's in the alternate history that Miriam created. That's what would happen. But a lot of other stuff, like I don't have any issues with the laptops being super thin, only having USB-C and all that. Yes, I think a full-size SD slot would make sense on a larger MacBook of like a 16-inch MacBook Pro. It would be nice because creators really need it, but I don't think that it's that huge of a deal. And I understand like going with USB-C and Thunderbolt, standardizing around that is very Apple and makes a lot of sense. And now that my entire world is USB-C, all we need is a USB-C iPhone, right, Apple?
I was just going to say the 11 Pro should have been USB-C.
So much.
100%.
So much.
Yeah. They missed the ball there because I think, you know, they have the iPad Pro with USB-C. You know, their Pro product should at least carry, you know, USB-C as a standard, but
I think it's coming next year.
We'll see it, obviously.
And
it's in the roadmap for sure.
I would love to know what goes on inside of Apple about this, because like I know they have MFI and they make a lot of money out of certifying accessories for that. It's like, you know, licensing fees, all that. And I get it, but at the same time I'm like, Apple, you're so rich right now. Do you really need it? Like, the sooner you switch your iPhones to USB-C, the sooner your customers will be happy. Like they're going to be upset once again, like when you switch from 30-pin to Lightning. And at the time you switched to Lightning, Lightning made sense. There was nothing out there that was better than Lightning. Yeah. And I get it. But then as soon as USB-C came out, you know, you should have started planning that maybe 2 years down the road you were going to go USB-C. But USB-C is 5 years old now.
Yep. Yeah.
And you've adopted your MacBooks since the 12-inch original MacBook, the scissor keyboard MacBook that I have, by the way. And I'm still on my original keyboard, and every now and then I get a stuck key. And you know what I do? I just mash at it really hard, and then it unsticks. Seriously.
I wish I could do that. Yeah.
Like, I don't know what it is about the very first gen, you know, butterfly keyboard, but yes, it sometimes has keys that get stuck, but you just like freaking mash at it really hard a few times and it just fixes itself. It's just magic. I love it. But the newer ones seem to be much more like once they're stuck, and there's nothing you can do.
Like my, you know, my space bar, I remember just no matter what I did, it would just not hit. And it was almost like it was just stuck to the chassis. Super frustrating.
Oh, Apple, you're going to make us cry. Keep doing butterfly keyboard. Anyway, so the Pixelbook Go, I think, if you're willing to take a bit of if you're looking for a really high quality Chromebook and you want to pay a little less than buying a Pixelbook, which you can still buy, and get maybe a slightly newer processor in there because the Pixelbook's getting a bit long in the tooth in terms of Intel processors, I say look at the Pixelbook Go, because if you don't spend money on the highest tier, if you just got the i5 that I have, which is like 8 gigs of RAM, 128 gigs of storage, is $849 is the list price on that one, you're going to be very, very happy. And I think you're going to be happier than any other Chromebook at that price point. And the only thing you have to kind of decide for yourself is whether you're okay with that display being a little dim, a little low res, and, you know, aspect ratio is really not a big deal, but it's definitely a difference if you're used to higher end Pixelbooks. So that's it. That's my takeaway. And your battery life is killer on this thing. I just, you know, they say 12 hours. I would say I easily got 10 out of it. And, you know, Chrome is a dog. Like, if you run Chrome on a Mac, you know how much it kills resources and battery life. So having a device that runs Chrome and lasts 10 hours without having to tweak anything is kind of nice, honestly, right? Yeah. Assuming you're a Chrome user and not a Safari user, or I have Firefox. I use Firefox a lot, actually.
I'm on Chrome. I
Dirty
know that,
little secrets.
You know, I did used to be on Safari, but you know, I made the switch to Chrome. There's just so many other extensions that you can add. But
yeah. I mean, Safari is a great browser if you're not like a heavy user, I think.
Yes, exactly.
Thing, you know? So yeah, that's kind of the world of the Pixelbook Go. Speaking of non-Apple devices, have you had a chance to play with that LG G8x ThinQ dual screen? Oh my God, what a mouthful that name is.
That's so funny because I actually got it, I think also 2 days ago. I initially thought it was, my delivery of my AirPods Pro coming in early. I got a little notification. I was like, yes, I got something. But it turned out to be, the long name dual screen LG phone. I don't even know the exact, the ThinQ X,
So
whatever
what's
it is.
have you set it up? What's your kind of gut feeling, like immediately, especially since you're more of an Apple guy?
Yeah.
Like, where does it tickle your fancy? Are you like, this is cool, or are you like, bah? I mean, be honest, because that's what we want to do here.
It was the latter. I've used, say, the second gen Samsung Fold. That was a device that, I was impressed with. I thought, the build was great. It felt premium. Coming from an iPhone, you're in that premium smartphone category. And, when I held, the second screen of this LG phone, I almost thought it was, because I don't really look at leaks. I don't really look at the news going on. I kind of just receive a device and, my actual initial impressions are when I'm actually holding the device for the first time. And I thought they sent me the wrong phone, to be honest. When I unboxed it, there's only one phone in the main box, and I didn't know that they sent the second device or the screen attachment case, whatever you want to call it, in a separate one. And, I saw a few photos online, and what I initially thought from, most folding phones, it would be just one device, together. Like, that's what you assume when you see a folding phone. But, LG's take on it is let's, give people the option, which I like. You have the option if you want to have two screens, you can have it. But I think the actual case just feels a bit finicky. It almost feels like a silicone case. And, I think if they spent, say, 50, or maybe $100 extra, you would pay to have, something a bit more premium, like whether that's metal. I don't know how the phone would get in there, but yeah, I'm not too crazy about it.
What about the experience? I mean, I'm going to jump in about what my thoughts are on the hardware itself, but I want to hear for me, I think this is the kind of product that's really made by the experience, and that's kind of where I think it falls apart.
Yeah, and that kind of, the same kind of thing, although the screens are identical, say, on the second screen, for some reason, you still have the front-facing camera cut out, even though there's nothing there.
Yeah.
And I know that LG did that because, people complain that, the color temperatures are different. It doesn't look like it's, continuous. So LG is like, hey, let's just use the exact same screen on both of these, but let's have a cutout for a non-existing camera. Like, to me, that doesn't really make any sense.
Right. Yeah. I think for me, okay, so if the phone by itself is unremarkable, it's basically the same as the G8 was, with a few things added and a few things removed. On the added, it's really just a few things removed, if you think about it. But some things were removed that were useless on the original, so it's a good thing. You know what I'm saying? It's kind of hard to explain. But if you look at the original G8, the one thing that made it great was that it was a very small phone in hand. It was a 6.1-inch display, so a small phone. And it felt nice in hand because of that. It was unremarkable in many other ways. It has a stupid gimmicks, gesture gimmicks that weren't really good at all and nobody cared about. But it did have 3D face unlock, which, was slightly more secure than most face unlocks on most Android phones. So that bonus for that. And the cameras on the original, believe it or not, if you're a bit of a camera person like I am and you really focus on imaging and you know your Android imaging ecosystem well, they were up there. They didn't get a lot of love from the rest of the media, but I did some tests and I was actually really impressed with it. And of course, there were only two, ultra wide and a regular, no zoom, no telephoto. But I was really quite impressed, especially low light. And the reason for that is f/1.4 and, really large pixels on that 12 megapixel main sensor. And I'm talking about the G8 here, the original. So that, and you had a quad HD display at 6.1 inches. So that was pretty good, pretty exciting. I think it's 6.1. I mean, it's smaller than 6.4 is all I know. So now the G8X, but in a vacuum without the case, is basically same spec, Snapdragon 855, 6 gigs of RAM, 128 gigs of storage, micro SD, wireless charging, all that stuff. But in front, they don't have that big notch with the 3D scanner and the gesture stuff. They have a teardrop, as you said, with a 32 megapixel, a 4-in-1 binning of pixels thing, so it outputs 8 megapixels. And the selfie camera is definitely a slight improvement, but the rear cameras, they cheapened them. I don't know if you looked at the specs. It's f/1.8 instead of f/1.4. And yeah, and get this, what made the G8 original G8 interesting was that the ultra wide was f/1.9. You don't see an ultra wide with that fast of a lens normally, and it was a 16 megapixel sensor. So you had a lot of detail and a decent low light performance on an ultra wide, which really made it unique. Now the G8X. It brings it down to a 13 megapixel with an f/2.4 lens. So it's just basically a very generic ultra wide sensor. So the camera is just passable on the G8X. You know, it's just worse actually. And the display, even though it's bigger at 6.4 inches and has a smaller notch, is a 1080p display. So you lose a little bit in terms of, you know, DPI, like pixel density. But overall, the phone is very boring and very generic and very LG in that sense. And there's really nothing to get excited here. So that's kind of my take on the hardware in a vacuum. And then if you put it in the case, well, you get a second identical display, and then you get a front little OLED notification display. And I agree with you. The case is kind of a mixed bag because it feels, the glass part feels really nice, right? You have like nice Gorilla Glass on all the surfaces. But then all the edges and everything is plastic.
Feels
and the back has that fake leather texture to it.
Yeah.
Or whatever, like weird grain to it. And it just feels kind of cheap. And the other difference between the two phones, by the way, is that the original had in the back had a capacitive fingerprint sensor, and this has an in-display fingerprint sensor. But here's the thing: the G8X's in-display fingerprint sensor, it's not too fast, but not too slow. It's fine in terms of speed. The problem is that I get a lot of false readings on it. Like I get a lot of failures on it, which I don't get on the OnePlus. I don't get on the more recent Huawei phones, and I don't get on pretty much anything else anymore. I mean, there was a time when early optical fingerprint sensors under display were kind of crap. OnePlus 6T, anyone? And then they got good.
They've gotten way better. They've gotten
but
way
the G8X to me feels like it's stuck in between somewhere. And it's not reliable. And I'm like, how did you fail at doing that one? So I'm going to re-register my fingers because maybe that's all it is. I just need to do it again.
So have you been using the G8X Dual?
So I have. And I stuck it in the case and I haven't taken it out of the case. The thing that's really, there's so many weird things about this case. I mean, glass is nice, but there's plastic construction otherwise. And it makes for a bulky, thick, bulky experience if you have both the phone and everything in there. And then as you saw, they removed the USB-C connector because the phone plugs via USB-C to the case. And so they put this MagSafe-like thing, right?
Yes, like this little magnetic connector.
Basically, in the box is an adapter. If you watch my unboxing, you'll see it. There's an adapter in the box that magnetically latches to the case, which is basically like a MagSafe. And it has a USB-C port on it, and you plug your cable into that. And so it's cool, but it feels like they only did it because they didn't have the depth to put a real USB-C cable connector in there, right?
And what happens when you lose that connector?
Like, not only that, but have you noticed how easy it is to accidentally hit it and it comes off?
It comes off, yeah.
That's one thing. MagSafe made sense because you didn't want your laptop to go careening down the coffee table and smash onto the ground. Your phone can careen down the coffee table and smash onto the ground, especially in a case. It'll be fine, Especially if you're charging, you're usually indoors. There's a wooden surface or probably a carpeted surface nearby. You're not having to worry too much about it taking a plunge. So I just don't understand. And then, of course, the headphone jack, because this is the cool thing. The G8, along with the G8X, both have that quad DAC LG super high quality amplifier and digital to analog converter for audio. If you're into wired audio, which I am into, it's one of the best audio experiences you can get on a phone with a headphone jack. So headphone jack, kudos. But with the case in, there's a little tunnel hole in the case for you to reach the headphone jack in the phone, and that you can almost put nothing in there. Like you have to have one of those super thin So connector like jacks on your headphones. Otherwise, nothing fits. Like my Bayer Dynamics that I'm using right now for the podcast here, they don't fit in that hole. So basically, you need an adapter anyway, and it's kind of fail. And you can't plug a USB-C dongle because it's that MagSafe thing. So there's a lot of weird little decisions here. And as you said, there's a notch on the second display that because as you said, the displays match for color temperature, for brightness, and that's good. I've never seen a dual display device because there was the ZT Axon M that was dual display.
Yes,
and the displays didn't match. Remember that? Like,
that's right. Yeah,
there were like different color temperatures and different. It was terrible.
That still feels, I think, more premium of an experience than this thing.
Absolutely.
And that ZTE device is how many years old now?
I know.
And the saving grace, it's like around $700 compared to say $2,000 for
Correct.
the Samsung. Like that is their only saving grace. That it's just cheaper. If they made the case more premium, they might take a chunk of the market. Because obviously foldable phones are a thing now. It's
I mean, the price is right. I think $699 with the case included is really decent. And I mean, if that's what you're looking for, kudos to you. But I think there's a lot of, head scratching implementation issue. Again, I understand why there's a notch on the second display because, again, it's cheaper to manufacture a display that's identical on both sides. And, mass production makes prices go down. I get it. But it's so weird. Like, people look at it and go like, oh, there's a second camera in there. I'm like, nope. And then everybody's like, but,
what's it for then?
Yeah. But as you said, to me, the biggest thing, forget all that. Even, and this was the same problem with the Axon M, was the user experience isn't there. Like, yes, Android now supports multitasking way better than ever before, and you can definitely have two apps running side by side vertically, like portrait mode on both displays, and that can be productivity boom if you like, wanting to look up a map on one side and you're writing on the other side or whatever. I get it, and I've used that, but you can only spread an app across both displays if it's like one of like 5 apps or something, Chrome being one of them.
Yeah. And that's like the 3-finger gesture to go over. Yeah.
Yeah. And then you have a massive gap in between them.
Yeah.
Which is like the Axon M didn't have a huge gap in between them. And of course the Galaxy doesn't have a gap at all since it's a folding screen.
Yeah.
And so to me, that's a good use case. I want to surf the web or or look at Instagram in a larger format. Of course, you can't look at Instagram on this phone in a larger format because that app doesn't stretch to both displays.
Yeah. I thought one of the coolest, I guess, like use cases they were actually demoing that was having, say, like, your dedicated game controller on one screen, the game, running on the second. But it's nice to have, but how often are you actually doing that? Like, how often are you like, okay, I'm going to run this game. I want a gamepad. I'm going to buy a phone so it can be, my gaming phone. Like,
I'm going to give them credits for this part because that's, I think, is the best implementation of the entire system is how they have this game mode where you can pick a controller of your liking and design your own controller on the bottom screen. You put it basically with screens and landscape, and the top screen has your game running, or you can have a YouTube video playing on the bottom screen, or maybe a Twitch stream playing on the bottom screen, and then you can have your game playing on the top screen, or vice versa. I mean, that stuff is, for gamers, I can see there is a potential point there. And of course, I also like the fact that they have, in certain apps that support landscape, let you have a landscape keyboard on the bottom screen, which is bigger to type on, and then the app running on the top screen. But here's the problem, Karl, and this is where I really feel it falls apart in user experience. Half the apps I tried didn't support that. Right. Twitter doesn't go in landscape mode. It stays in portrait.
Right.
So even if you go to create a tweet, and then your keyboard pops up on the bottom half of the one display you're in, if you rotate it to landscape at that point, nothing happens because Twitter doesn't support landscape. So you don't get the keyboard on the bottom half of the bottom screen. You just get nothing on the bottom screen and the Twitter app running in portrait on the top screen. It's ridiculous. Same with Facebook. So, I don't know.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's, is this their first attempt? I can't even remember. They had something else before.
No, they did the V50 as well.
That's right. Okay.
Yeah, but it wasn't the V50. The thing about the V50 was it was even worse because it wasn't using USB-C.
Yeah.
So it was using Pogo pins or something.
Pogo, that's right.
And the displays were different, so there was issues with color.
So we're not even counting that.
Yeah, we don't count that. But look, I don't want to be mean to LG because in the past they did some really great stuff. In the last few years, though, they've struggled to innovate in a way that makes sense. And this is, again, like the same as the G8 with the gestures that were gimmicks. This is not a gimmick. There is a potential use and productivity case for this, but the software and the experience just aren't there to really justify to me Although arguably $699 isn't a lot of money. So basically, if you want to run two apps side by side in portrait mode, and this is super critical to whatever you're doing, that phone is fine with the case for $699. That's the only use case. Or if you are a gamer and you want the game controls at the bottom. That's it. That's my take, you know?
I like the option, you know, if, you know, I were to grab this, I would probably have it out of the case, you know, 80, 90% of the time. And for those specific things, like say, you know, when I do some mobile gaming, I could throw the phone in, do mobile gaming. Once I'm done, I would take it out right away.
But that means, where do you put the case when you're not using it? Then you forget it at home.
I was going to say, at home. Yeah, sure.
And you have a very meh phone. Like, honestly, at $699, I would buy a OnePlus 7T. And that thing just runs circles around it in every possible conceivable way, right?
Absolutely, yep.
Before we wrap up on the G8X, I just wanted to say that there is another difference between that and the original G8 is that the battery size, because the bigger phone with the bigger display, battery life on the original G8 was a bit of an issue because it had like a 3,000 milliamp hour battery or something small. And this is 4,000, so this is much, much better battery life. And you need that because you're driving two displays. And I've actually have to say that the battery life on this phone with both displays has kind of impressed me. I definitely did some good work there in terms of optimizing for battery life, considering you're firing an entire other OLED panel and a small little panel on the front as well.
Yeah, I think they said the secondary display would take, I think, like 20%.
Yeah.
But anyways, it's obviously better. You need that battery size to, like you said, run two displays.
So, you know, again, I don't want to be mean to LG because I know they're trying, and of course they're having really issues with their market share in the phone world.
Right.
But they need to, like, I really want them to do what they did in the early days of the G series, right? The Optimus G was the first one, then the G2, G3, the G4. Like, these phones at the time really stood out and in the Android universe, and they, you know, the G6 is the last I felt that really stood out. It was the first phone with an 18:9 aspect ratio display.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
And at the time I reviewed it, I was just like, this is great. This is such a solid phone. The camera was good. Everything was good about it. But since then, it just feels like they've kind of missed the mark. Yeah. And I want to love them. And this is definitely very interesting, but it's hard for me to recommend this phone, right?
Yep, I agree.
Yeah. So let's switch to the other topics we have on the show right now. So there's a bunch of little things. Moto made some announcements this week. They don't really matter to North America, although in Canada, you guys get a lot of these odd Moto 1 series phones, don't you?
Yeah, we kind of, I'm not too sure what their strategy is sometimes, but we do see the odd Moto phone. I'm not too sure if we'll get, you know, this latest line.
Yeah, so the G series will definitely be coming. I mean, I'd be surprised if it didn't come to North America. The G7 just came out 6 months ago, and it's surprised that the G8 is being announced so early. Normally, this is like an late winter, early spring announcement, the G series, and so it might be that 2019 is the first year where they've launched the G7 and the G8. The same year, basically, the G8 coming out in the winter now. They didn't announce a G8 proper. They just did a G8 Play and a G8 Plus. Not to be confused with the LG G8, by the way. This is a Moto G8. Moto G8 Play and Plus. Not too much to say about these other than the G8 Plus looks a lot more like the Moto 1 series of phones, instead of having a round pod in the back in the middle of the phone, top middle, it has kind of more like all the cameras lined up in a row along the left side of the back, which is much more the design that we've seen with the Moto 1 series. And speaking of that, they announced another Moto 1 as part of that little bundle of phones. And then E6 Play, the E series being the cheaper than the G series phones. You don't see these in North America much, but they're very popular in like Latin America, South America, India, etc. So I mean, you know, this is really no big deal. I'll have a link to the Engadget story in the show notes. Yep. But what struck me a little bit was how the G8 Plus is kind of almost upper mid-range now in terms of specs. And, you know, it's being announced like now. Like, this is such a weird kind of things in terms of timing. So, and again, it's around the same price point as we've seen with the G series in the past, like $300.
$300.
So.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, you know, I saw that they have one of them is guess like focused on like the cameras. They have like say
Yeah.
a dedicated like macro lens. Are you a big macro photographer?
Yeah, I
Like
mean,
smartphone?
I like having access to a macro, but
Yeah.
I don't know if you necessarily need a dedicated macro lens.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, one of the phones is the Moto One macro. They did a Moto One zoom, which had a zoom lens. They did a Moto One action, which had a ultra wide lens, but not what you think, Carl. It had it rotated 90 degrees, so it
Okay.
would give you landscape video if you held it in portrait.
Right.
Right, that was really weird, kind of like a GoPro, and that was kind of why it's called Action. And then they did this. Now they have this Moto One Macro, which has a macro lens. I like the way Huawei does their macro, where they have autofocus on the ultra wide, and they let you get super close up to something, and then the autofocus combined with the ultra wide lens gives you that super close, 2 centimeter macro photography option, right? Honor did something interesting with the Honor 20 Pro, where they had a dedicated 2 megapixel macro lens, but it was a fixed focus lens. So you pretty much had to find the sweet spot and look in the viewfinder to find out where your focus point was.
Yes.
It had a very shallow depth of field.
Yeah.
And with 2 megapixels, the detail wasn't there, right? So again, I feel like what Huawei's been doing with the ultra wide, having autofocus and using that for macro might make more sense than a dedicated macro lens. But these are phones that are not in the same league as the Huawei's I'm talking about.
Of course,
this is
yeah.
a €199 phone, right?
Yeah.
So I don't know. I mean, the bottom line is that it's interesting that it looks like the G8, the G series, basically with this G8 that's prematurely being launched in the fall now, is kind of merging into the Moto One line in some markets. Basically, they're kind of, they were pretty separate lines before. Now they're kind of like coming together. I just don't understand what Lenovo and Moto are up to in terms of their marketing strategy.
Yeah.
None of this makes any sense to me.
I, not that I follow like this line too much, but I did hear some buzz around, and I don't know if we mentioned it earlier. They have also like a folding phone, almost like, the old school Razor,
Right.
but that is a foldable device. That's another interesting one that I'd love to, test out. Like folding phones were the jam back in the day.
Yeah.
Like
So
everyone had one.
I have a pretty good relationship with Moto PR here in the US, and they did not invite me to that event on the 13th in LA. They and I pinged them about it. They said, we have very limited space. We're being very selective about who we're calling in, and we appreciate your interest and we'll be in touch, but
Right.
not this time, Miriam. And I was like, fair enough. But I think that we talked about it on the last show. I think this is going to be very interesting. I'm really looking forward to seeing what the Razor looks like. And in fact, there's a leak this morning. I saw a tweet somewhere.
Okay.
I think Evan Blass, EVLeaks, leaked a photo of the phone. And it looks pretty much identical to what the Razors used to look like, but obviously has a folding display in it. So it's got that chin, that signature chin. They went all out. They owned it.
You know what? I'm a fan of that. Like everyone had a Razor phone, and that will be kind of cool. And the flip phone market is it's not really there anymore.
The reality is that if you can flip this thing open and get about the same real estate as a normal phone today,
yeah,
right, like a small normal phone, like a 6.1-inch display phone, I think they might have a winner, and especially if it's a little more robust than what we've seen with the Galaxy Fold. I think it might be it might work out. And so let's see. And related to that, this week is the Samsung Developer Conference in San Jose.
Yeah.
And Samsung showed on stage, kind of hinted at a folding phone coming from them that was in that form factor, like a vertical portrait, long, tall device that folds in half in the middle into something that's clamshell and sits in your pocket, closed in your pocket. So very similar to the Razor. So I think maybe that's how we're going to get this folding phone world to come to life in terms of reliability and accessibility, in terms of pricing. Hopefully, if that Razor can be $1,000, right, which not 2,000 is what I'm saying.
Of course,
then it will be like the Razor was originally. The original V3 was $600 when it came out. It was a lot of money. It was heavily subsidized by carriers, but I can see this launching on Verizon and being super subsidized. $200 on contract, sign your life away for 3 years or something crazy like that.
Right.
And people flocking to it just on what's it called, nostalgia alone. And if they
Yeah.
make it good enough to be a little more rugged than the Fold is today, I think it could be a pretty successful product.
I'd love to see that. Just for, good time's sake.
So yeah, I will add a link to these Moto phones along with a link to this leak from EV-Leaks in the show notes. Check it out. And then of course I'll also add something about the Samsung folding, the second type of Samsung folding phone. And I mean, how do you feel about folding phones? Do you think that we're finally going to get something a little more reliable with this Razr? That's my big fear, right?
Yeah, I think folding phones are just so different from, everything else that we've seen in maybe, 6-7 years? Like, the smartphone hasn't really changed, too much. And, every time I've had, a folding phone, like I said, I had that second gen Samsung folding phone. Everyone was like, what the hell are you holding in your hands? Like, that thing is awesome. And it's just, that thing that's so, so different. And if we can get something that's actually reliable, it might just be that, wow factor, that thing that just stands out because, it's really cool. Like, a screen that fully folds out into fully functional, almost like mini tablet size. Maybe that will just eventually become like a gimmick and will become the norm, like in the future.
Yeah.
That, every device can fold. Your iPhone can fold. It's nothing special.
I'm much more excited about the Galaxy Fold thing, where, what Huawei is doing with the Mate X, where, it's a phone in your hand in one form factor, and then you open it up and it becomes a tablet, and you have way more real estate. But I can totally see how the average consumer might be more excited about something like the Razr, where it's smaller, slimmer, and folded and protected in your pocket, and you open it up when you want to do some stuff. The question here is, do you remember the original Razr? Obviously you do, but I'm just saying, imagine this in your head, remember it in your head when you kept opening and closing it, opening and closing it, opening and closing it hundreds and hundreds of times a day, because it was that fidget spinner type thing, right?
Yes. You would just open it just for the hell of it.
Imagine that with a folding display.
Right.
Ooh, that's what, if they can nail the reliability, that's what I meant, when I said that. Like, if they can nail the reliability, this will fly. But if they can't, it's going to be a disaster very quickly.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Like, we'll have to kind of see. Like, I'm sure they're doing testing on that. But like you said, it was the fidget spinner of the day, or, it was just something that you would just do without, paying attention. And I'm not, I was even doing that with with the Galaxy Fold.
Well, yeah, everybody did.
Yeah.
So next one I want to really touch on quickly is a bit of a weird one. The Honor 9X is out in Europe. Now you're going to say, didn't this phone come out in the summer, Miriam? I'm like, yeah. The Honor 9X was announced in the summer for Chinese markets. It was the last phone to be announced before the Huawei ban went into effect, meaning it's technically the last phone from the Honor Huawei universe that has GMS, Google Mobile Services.
Yep.
So that's kind of why this article caught my eye, because it was launched in China, then we didn't hear anything about it coming to other markets. And of course, in China, it didn't have GMS, but it was eligible for GMS. And then they did a 9X Pro in China as well. And that one definitely doesn't have GMS. And then this news comes across last week where they say the Honor 9X is coming to Europe with GMS. And not surprisingly, since it's allowed to have GMS. But here's the thing. Here's the crazy thing, Karl. If you look at that 9X, its specs and the way it's designed, this is actually kind of a merger of specs and hardware between the 9X and the 9X Pro. It has the triple camera system of the 9X Pro, which doesn't exist on the original 9X. And it has, the specs are worse. Like, instead of a Kirin 810, it has a Kirin 710F. And, I know we're getting down the rabbit hole of specs and nitty gritty here.
Right.
But it's just really weird to me that Honor is selling a phone 2 months later, that's actually very different for Europe, calling it the 9X so that they can get GMS certification. It's weird. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's almost like they're cheating. Because this is like a third phone almost with a different chip and combining design elements of the other two, right? So, yeah, that's really all I have to say about it. I have the 9X Pro, which is the non-GMS Kirin 810 version, I guess, of this phone.
Okay.
And it has the 3 cameras on the back. And it's a great phone. I was able to work around the GMS issue by installing LZ Play on it.
Right.
But man, it's rough using a phone without GMS. I tried for a little while. And I was just like, oh my God, what a nightmare this is.
Yeah, I think my first device that, I typically obviously would only use devices with Google services, was the Vivo device.
Yeah.
I'm trying
the
to
Next
recall.
3,
the
right?
Next 3, yeah.
Yeah. I
the
will
Next
link
3
to your
5G.
video on that because
Cool.
you did a cool video about it.
Yeah, I headed off to, China for that event, and, being the first time without Google services, like, you're pretty limited in what you can do. Like, I couldn't obviously call like an Uber. Something to me is just, hey, this is so simple. I couldn't even do that. And, it was definitely a big shock.
Yeah, it's a different world. And so I don't recommend it if you are, used to Google Apps and Google Services. It's not just Google Services and Google Apps. Apps like Netflix don't run.
Right.
Apps like Uber and Lyft don't run.
Exactly.
So it's way more than that. So just be mindful and aware of that. So anyway, interesting. There's a 9X in Europe. It doesn't have the same chip. It has the same camera system as the 9X Pro, and it has GMS. And it looks like it's a major loophole of naming conventions that they're able to get this phone out in Europe.
Yeah.
Pretty smart though, unless somebody figures it out eventually. I don't know. Maybe it's all legit. I don't know. It's weird.
Yeah. We'll see what happens.
Speaking of weird and weird phones and weird, madness, the Red Hydrogen 1, which was a disaster of a phone that was super hyped and came out to be quite underwhelming and underdelivered significantly, is no more. The founder, one of the founders of Red Cameras, Jim Jannard, is retiring, and apparently they announced that the Red Hydrogen project is dead, and basically that means that there were rumors of them working on a second phone. That's not happening. And then maybe these modules people have been waiting for their first phones are not happening.
Yeah.
I could have told you this a while ago, folks. I hope you didn't spend the money on this phone.
Yeah, that's too bad. It's there was, like you said, so much hype around it, especially like in the tech space, having a smartphone with a camera that could compete, say, with a mirrorless, something that was really, really good. But like you said, we kind of saw the signs coming. It was delayed, and now it's just RIP. It's too bad.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy, right? That how sometimes if there's a lesson here, it's that please do not overhype things.
Yeah.
It's just not a good idea. All right, folks, I promised you that if you stay tuned in, there would be a giveaway at the end. Well, it's not a giveaway I'm doing, but here's what's happening. My friend Murray Newlands is a tech entrepreneur type dude who's really awesome here in Silicon Valley, and he's starting a podcast. And he said, hey, Miriam, would you be my guest on the first few episodes? And basically what we're doing is we're collaborating on a show called How to CEO. As you know, I've had a lot of experience working in various startups over the years, working as a C-level executive, not a CEO myself, but I obviously have a lot of experience with the madness that is Silicon Valley over the last 20 years I've lived here. So if you're interested in hearing me on a completely different set of topics, but we're going to touch on some things that are potentially related to what we talk about here, like the Huawei stuff, the whole Huawei ban. We're going to talk about that and other things. If you want to hear me on some other topics, kind of more political and tech related and kind of how-to related in terms of running a business and stuff, you should tune in to the podcast that Murray is doing. I'll give you the URL. It's murraynewlands.com/CEO. That's MurrayNewlands.com/CEO. And if you go to that URL, which I will put in the show notes below, so you can just click through that, you'll see that he's doing a giveaway on his channel of AirPods Pro. So stay tuned for our first podcast together, and there'll be, I think, 4 together we're doing. And definitely subscribe to the podcast and follow the instruction at that URL to sign up for getting potentially a pair of AirPods Pro, right?
Nice.
That's basically what the takeaway is. So yeah, exciting stuff. And I want to also give you a chance, Karl, to tell people where they can find you on the internet. What are your different URLs and social media handles and all that good stuff? Where can people find you if they're looking for you?
Yeah, for sure. It's, if you just actually, all my handles are actually, my name, Karl Conrad. So, of course, youtube.com, Karl Conrad, Instagram.com, Karl Conrad, Twitter, exactly the same. And the key thing, that's Karl with a K, because most people would actually use C. Karl with a K, Conrad with a C.
Exactly, Conrad with a C, because there's a bunch of imitators out there that have
there,
the 2 Ks.
Are, which is weird.
I saw that. I was like, oh, you devils. And of course, Karl's YouTube channel, I will have a link to several of his videos in the show description, show notes below. So check them out, subscribe, all that good stuff. You know where to find me on the internet. I'm at ThankGirl, TNKGRL on Twitter and Instagram. You know how to spell that. It's ThankGirl, like the comic book character, but without the vowels. And you'll see, if you want to basically comment and discuss the podcast, do it on Twitter. That's basically the place to do it. Instagram is where I post pretty pictures of gadgets and pretty pictures taken with gadgets. And then my YouTube channel, youtube.com/MiriamJoire. My full name spelled out. If you don't know how to spell that, it's in my Twitter. So check out my name there and remove the space, put it in the YouTube URL. Boom, you're there. My channel is a lot smaller than Karl's, but it's been around for a long time, and what it is basically complimentary content to this podcast. So if you want to watch videos of the devices I just talked about, like that Honor 9X Pro, boom, you're going to have some stuff there. Check it out. Please subscribe to the channel, like the videos, hit the notification icon, comment in the comments, all that good stuff. And same goes to the podcast. mobiletechpodcast.com is the URL. If you just happen to stumble on this by accident and you want to subscribe, go to that URL, mobiletechpodcast.com. It's also below in the show notes. And subscribe. You can subscribe in many different ways. Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Pocket Casts, Overcast, Spotify, a bunch of places. Do me a big favor. If you do subscribe, please leave a good review, a good rating. This makes a big difference for discoverability. People can find me easier if you review and you put a good rating in there, assuming you like the show, etc., etc. So consider rating the show on whatever favorite podcast platform you use. And finally, I want to thank our sponsor, Audible.com. Audible is the platform for audiobooks. If you like audiobooks, if you like books, if you want to not read but listen to books for a reason, I don't know, you're a delivery driver, all day you're behind the wheel and you need to listen to books but you can't read them, they are your best friend. Audible.com is awesome. They have a ton of selection, great books read by the authors often. They're really cool. I suggest you check them out. They've been a long-time sponsor of the show, and there's a URL I'm going to give you, and it's in the show notes below. If you click through that URL, you'll support the podcast, so consider doing that. If you're not already an Audible customer, it's audibletrial.com/mobiletech. That's audibletrial.com/mobiletech. This will give you 30 days free use of the platform, and you can keep the books that you download at the end even if you cancel, and in the process you support the show. Hopefully you like the platform, you stick around, but consider supporting the show by supporting our sponsor, Audible.com. And Karl, thank you.
Yes, thank you. It was great. This is actually my first podcast that I've done.
No, well,
yes.
You're total natural. You see, this is the thing.
I don't know.
No, I think you were. You were great. Yeah, absolutely. We'll have you on again sometime. Maybe we're in some Apple news lands. Who knows? I'll ping you for sure.
Absolutely. Would love to.
And until then, folks, there's another show next week. So stay tuned for that. And cheers, everybody.
This has been the Mobile Tech Podcast with ThankGirl, proudly presented by worldpodcasts.com. You can visit us online at mobiletechpodcast.com.